So this segment is daily life and independence. We're going to have a presentation and discussion around this. Our speakers are Charisse McDonald, who is an occupational therapist with the neuromuscular team at Holland Bloorview. And we also have Zina Dia, who is a youth facilitator at Holland Bloorview. And of course, we have Dr. Laura McAdam joining us as well for this segment. So welcome one and all. And without further ado, we will get to all of these areas that are so important to the family and the boys. So please, Charisse and Zina, take it away.
Hi, sorry, technology is not my friend today. I recognize that this presentation is open to parents who might be at very different stages of diagnosis. So I'm hoping that we can have some discussion about topics that are important for you and hopefully relevant for everybody, just with some different application. So it's going to kind of happen in two parts. First, I'm going to look at what I hope is a practical look at energy conservation strategies and the importance of energy conservation for participation. And then for the second part, we're going to try to look at kind of where your child is now, or possibly thinking of kind of hopes for the future when you think about daily living and independence. And please feel free to ask any questions or generate discussion if there's something that we don't talk about that you want to talk about. We're happy to kind of discuss whatever is important for you and your family. So I'm going to just share my screen and then we'll get started. But like I said, please feel free to ask questions if you have any. Okay, hopefully you can see the right screen now. So what is energy conservation? When we think about energy conservation, it's a term you probably hear a lot, but I don't know how often we actually really explain what it is. So it's a tool that can help your child to participate in activities that they need to or want to throughout the day. And it involves learning how to make decisions around the use of energy and making sure that your child is able to participate in activities that they have to do or want to do. And can also be important for managing pain as well. So we know our children have a certain amount of energy through the day, and for some of them, they're going to get tired and then won't be able to participate in some activities. So we really want to be mindful about how we're using it and when we're using it to make sure that we're participating in activities that are most important to either you as a family or for your children individually. So when we talk about energy conservation, we talk about kind of the 4 Ps. And they're not used in isolation. We kind of meld them all together. But I'll go through each of them and kind of give you some examples of how they might apply to your life. And we've tried to pick some examples just for different, again, stages and ages for individuals with Duchenne. So with pacing, we're talking about either taking breaks or slowing down to help manage fatigue and support participation. So we really want to teach your child to use skills that they have to listen to their body and follow cues. And so for younger kids, that's something that sometimes we have to teach and work on, that listening to your body. And as your children get older, they tend to get very good at knowing their bodies and knowing when they need to take those breaks. So for example, if you have a child who has an extracurricular program after school, it could be a sport or Volt hockey or whatever they're participating in, that might be a day that they're taking more breaks or a planned break before the activity or use of a mobility device during the day more than maybe they would on another day, to make sure that they have enough energy to enjoy and participate in the activity after school, if that's an important activity to them. For prioritization, we're really thinking about what activities are most important for your child to complete in the day. And what they think is important might be different than what you think is important. So there may be some negotiation there. But if something's important, you need to make it a priority and delegate other tasks that are maybe less important, or leave them for another day if it's possible, depending on what the activity is. And we really want to emphasize for families that things that are fun and meaningful are often important activities to prioritize. And your child will also learn over time which activities take more energy and which take less energy, and how to help with prioritizing and delegating as well. So for a child who's able to dress themselves, it may take a lot of energy. So that might be something that they get help with just because it's not as important an activity for them. Or perhaps it is an important activity for them. And so that's something they really want to do. But if we're maybe going to a birthday party or a family gathering, on those days, you may get help with something like dressing so that you're kind of saving some energy for that party rather than using it earlier in the day to spend a lot of time getting dressed if that's something that's challenging. For planning, we really want you to consider your schedule and your child's schedule and think about what time you're engaging in activities, how do they work for the routine. Are there you have to be a little detective, and are there parts in the day where you can make some changes to conserve energy? So for example, for some of our kids, if they're living, especially in a multi-level house, if they're able to get dressed and do all of their upstairs activities before they come downstairs for maybe breakfast and to leave the house, that's a really nice use of planning to conserve energy rather than kind of running up and down the stairs and forgetting your socks and having to go back up and then needing to go up and grab something else. So just really planning out the morning so that you're minimizing some of that extra energy use. And then we talk about positioning. So some positions require bodies to work harder than others. We know standing is harder for us. Maybe static sitting without support is hard. Moving is hard or harder. So an important part of energy conservation is choosing positions where your child's body is well supported. And as well, this is important for comfort too. So we think of using supported seating when you're taking a break. So when we talk about taking a break in gym class, we're often recommending a chair with a back support and maybe even arm support so that your body has support while you're sitting and resting versus sitting on the floor where you're going to have to get back up off the floor. Or supportive seating for dressing or even just positioning in our wheelchair. We know the better our body's supported, the less we're working, and then the more energy we have for other things like learning. As we talk about energy conservation, equipment often comes up as well. We talk about equipment for activities of daily living and also for mobility. For daily living, and mobility, both, equipment is providing kind of two benefits. One is certainly to help with that energy conservation piece. And then there's also a safety component sometimes as well. But using, for example, a shower chair may allow for your child to have a bit more independence. If they're not working hard to balance, they might be able to better use their arms to help with washing their bodies. Using a manual wheelchair on a family outing. For example, if you're walking to the park or going to the zoo or doing something where they're going to be doing longer distances, might provide them with the opportunity then to get out of the chair and move and play rather than tiring out on the walk over there. Or using a power chair. We're thinking of some of our teens and young adults who are becoming a bit more independent, even our preteens. To hang out with friends after school or during the day at school even might mean that they can go to a movie and have a longer day with friends rather than fatiguing at school in less supportive positioning where they're really needing to go home and take a rest at the end of the day. So I'll pause here for a minute. I don't know if we want to chat a little bit about energy conservation, or alternatively, can go straight into chatting a little bit more about some daily living and independence, and then have some discussion at the end.
Sure, I'd say just head forward. We have no questions in the chat at the moment.
Okay, and I think, Rick, we had a poll for this one. I don't know, is that set up or we'll just wing it? Ah, perfect. Okay, so I'll introduce the poll just before we go. You're right on it. Perfect. But what I'm hoping to do here is we're going to talk a little bit about daily living and independence. And I want to make sure that we're talking about areas that are kind of relevant for whoever is attending. So we'll select some of the most popular ones to chat about, but we have options including independent living, driving, where else are we? Recreational activities, work and continuing education. I'm not going to talk about today just because there's already a presentation on that. Addressing essential equipment, friendships and relationships, and attending appointments. Okay, that. Okay. So it looks like we're going to chat a little bit about independent living. We'll talk about equipment, and maybe we can have more of a discussion around that, just depending on what questions people have, and then friendships and relationships as well. And again, feel free to ask any specific questions you have, and we can have some conversation as well. Okay. So, let's see. So if we're talking about living independently, which is one of the questions that we had, I think a really important thing to consider is just what this means to your family and to your teen or young adult child. So independence can look really different for each person based on their personal goals, their beliefs, their culture. So we want to be mindful that kind of independence can mean different things to different people. So for some, it might mean living with more independence within the family home. It might mean living with peers or a partner. It might be living alone and looking at some community supports. So part of considering this and having this discussion with your family is really talking about what that means and what that might look like. And then as we're starting to think about living alone, there are a lot of different things to consider. And many we want to consider before you're living on your own so that you have some skills and you're set up for success, and your child is set up for success for living independently. And Zena will probably have more to add to this, so we'll get her to share at the end as well. So one thing is thinking about transportation planning and training. So some treatment centers may have transportation planning or training programs. So I know at Holland Bloorview, we offer programs where some of our teens will learn how to take Wheel-Trans independently or regular TTC. So it's something to ask if it's available at your local treatment center. And if it's not, still a skill that you want to teach your child. And if there's not public transportation, considering what other options there are for transportation, both for appointments and social activities, but also if kind of yet to do something spontaneous or in an emergency. Another really important skill for living independently is learning to work with a personal support worker. So it takes a lot of time to learn how to direct your care to somebody, and especially somebody new. So we really encourage really any of the families that we work with, as soon as their child is starting to need help, if they are open and interested and their family is open and interested, to start considering use of a personal support worker for some care needs, just to start teaching your child the skill of delegating care and teaching someone new how to do the work. Parents are really, really good at kind of reading their kids' cues and knowing exactly what they want and how they want it. But if you're living alone and working with another personal support worker, it's really important to know how to explain how you want your care done to somebody. And there are going to be opportunities where workers change and stuff. So it's a really important skill to learn. Another piece is planning ahead. So where are you going to live? What supports are available there? What is it, an accessible home? Do you need to make changes for accessibility? Making sure you have any equipment you might need in place, considering how you're going to get food or groceries, budgeting. I know there's a session coming up on personal finances as well. So lots of planning that goes into that as well. And for some of the supportive living options, there are wait lists and things to consider as well, if that's something that you're considering or your child is interested in. And I think really important to just remember that building independence is a journey and takes time. Oh, wrong slide. So we really want to meet kind of your child where they are, start teaching them how, when they're a bit younger, kind of earlier into their teens, to start taking the lead for parts of appointments or attending a part of appointment by themselves. Teaching them to write questions down if they have them before an appointment, or kind of writing down notes, interacting with their healthcare team a bit more independently. So I think next we'll go to accessing equipment. So, there it goes. So in terms of pediatric services, and I know we talked about accessing equipment through kind of considerations for adult services yesterday, but really important to work with your local therapy services. If you're not connected, ask your physician or your neuromuscular team for a referral if it's not something that they do. And work with a therapist and a vendor to arrange trials, ask to see more than one option if you're not happy with what you've tried, and make sure things work in your environment. We also want to think about what your needs are now and your environment, but also kind of considering into the future. And the funding demands and regulations are different from province to province. So it's important to understand what funding looks like, but also kind of that can sometimes inform how you're making decisions about equipment. So in Ontario, we're thinking 5 years ahead usually for mobility devices, just because that's the nature of the funding in the province, but that might look different in different parts of the country. So it's important to work with your therapist on that. If it's appropriate to look at more specialized clinics for specialized services. And we also want to make sure that you're looking at funding resources and exploring funding resources. There are a few different goals of equipment. So depending on the age of your child, it might be to allow them to continue to have some independence. So to make transfers safer for bathing, to decrease fall risk and provide more postural support for more independence, to allow for increased participation in peer interaction, for comfort. I mean, we know positioning is very, very important for hand and arm function. So making sure that we're really maximizing your child's ability to participate in things that are important to them. And so I think next was friendships and relationships. So I believe there have been a few other talks on some of this as well. So we'll touch just a little bit, but I think we know maintaining friendships outside of school can be challenging and might take some effort. So your child might need some support reaching out with peers that have similar interests. And we want children to form relationships early and hopefully build on those relationships over time. and certainly connect to people throughout their kind of learning, but then also outside of school as well. Staying involved in recreational activities is a really good way for all people to connect and meet other people who have similar interests. So we know sometimes there are film clubs, there are robotics clubs, there are all sorts of different activities that we want to support engagement in as much as possible. We also want your children and for you to know that if meeting people or maintaining relationships is challenging for them, that they can get help. So sometimes it can be your family doctor, sometimes it's a guidance counselor at school or a social worker. It could be someone on your neuromuscular team as well, but we want kind of your children to have feel that they have a safe person to talk to and develop skills to build connection. I know some treatment centers might also offer coaching services and other services to support with goals around friendships and relationships. We also want to talk about kind of dating and sexual health as well for kind of your teens or young adults. Even if they're not talking to you about it, it's probably something that their peers are talking about and that they might be thinking about or interested in. So we want really to encourage your teenagers or young adults to make meaningful connections and really think of kind of a full relationship. And as well, kind of to have some connection. They may, as they're exploring sexuality, sexual expression, want support around things like energy conservation, positioning, adaptive tools, and that might be for self-exploration or for a relationship with somebody else. So if they do have questions about sex or about their body, it's important for them to have somewhere to go to get accurate and helpful information. Some parents are comfortable having these conversations and some are not. So to know that they have, whether they have a physician that they can talk to or a therapy team, that's valuable as well. And I know Muscular Dystrophy Canada does have a few resources on their website as well. So I'll skip ahead just to the resources here about some of the things that we talked about today. And then maybe I'll kind of stop for a bit and we can chat a little bit about some of this in more detail or answer questions you have or have some discussion around it, and can certainly go back to some of the other topics if we want to.